Hi, welcome to my channel. I'm Grace Lynch. So today's video is about, uh, it's going to deal with an extension of the inventory. One of the difficulties I found in trying to apply the traditional neurotypical approach to 12-step recovery was that of doing a thorough inventory, and I'll explain that by saying that when I got picking up the streets and I had the diagnoses, and I couldn't find any treatment for anything. I couldn't get a comprehensive treatment plan. I couldn't even find a philosophy or science around it. And I also found that finding my words for it was something that wasn't welcome at the meetings I was going to because people assumed there was outside help. Then the only thing that I had ever trusted in my adult life throughout the entire brain injury, because the brain injury happened before I got sober, was the 12 steps. And so my hope in going back through the steps was that it would somehow reacquaint me, or it would give me a new grounding in my what my life had become, and it would also give me a new grounding in my sobriety because I had come to a point after so many years that I had realized that the whole of my sobriety had happened inside the mistaken thinking that I had back when I fell. One of the consequences of not having any information for what had happened to me in 1987 was that I did the best I could to come up with my own understanding. And so in 2015, when the neurologist told me what had actually happened, a logical consequence is that all of what I thought had happened was incorrect. The meaning of it was incorrect, and everything that had been based on it was also incorrect. So I had stayed physically sober, but I didn't have any understanding of how the program had actually been real for me because I never had an understanding of how the words worked in the first place. It was a very difficult time of my life, and so I was struggling to process my autism. I was struggling to process my sobriety inside correct information about myself. And I was struggling to grapple with the fact that I'd experienced aphasia autistically. I was just coming to grips with the new information that I had PTSD. As I shared on a previous video, that I didn't know for most of my life that men could have PTSD unless they served in combat. The way that I was raised, PTSD was only something that could happen to women and men who served in wars. So I couldn't even imagine that I had that. I thought, I just had some bad experiences and it was hard and it was my job to suck it up. And so when I had these diagnoses, I'm trying to rebuild my sense of my life, especially now that language is coming back, with no tools, no community. I turned back to the 12 steps. One need was to get a new grounding in what my sobriety actually was inside tools and ways of relating to other people in sobriety that we would have in common. But another idea that I'd had was that from a certain perspective, regardless of what the names of my conditions were that I was struggling to understand, the need to understand and the stress of not having answers for myself was playing a role in how I lived my life without drugs and alcohol. And as such, they became aspects of my recovery. Aside from what they meant in psychological terms or developmental terms, those are stories that the world has about these classes of experiences. For me, that was what I came to see. I don't have to buy into what the world says they are just because the world says it loudly. They're my experiences. I don't have to separate them off. All of me is alcoholic. All of me is addicted. All of me is autistic. All of me is male. All of me is gay. All of me is a father. I'm not a little bit any of these things. I'm not partially. I'm not sometimes. I'm not part-time. So as such, all of these are experiences that I need to deal with inside my recovery from alcoholism and addiction. So I'm having a new experience with the steps. And one of the things I came to know as this method started to actually find its feet, and I got some results, and I had some peace of mind. I had a functional way of life. I had a way to sort of be at peace with myself and the world, and a way to understand experiences as they happen that made sense to me, and even beginning to get ways to relate back to the world after I completed all the amends and everything. And started working with others. I came to understand that one of the difficulties of making a thorough inventory is that part of the things that, and I expanded resentment to be anything that bothers me. Part of the things that bothered me were aspects of myself that I had never reckoned with. So the problem, though, was that inventory was always in written language, itemized thing to communicate with other people, which means it has to be in words that understandable by other people. The problem is that there were experiences and ways of processing my life that I had never even found words for. Therefore, it is impossible that I could have done a complete inventory. And even once I became aware of my autism, aphasia, and trauma, nobody had ever been in the intersection of those three before. Nobody else had found words for those, and I had not found words. And part of the experience was actively aphasic. So it was without words, and it was still perfectly coherent and real. If an inventory is based on words, it's going to be impossible to do a complete inventory to get in touch with the authenticity of my experience because it's beyond words, even though it's perfectly normal and healthy for me. And so this kind of impasse, if I wanted to have a thorough inventory, I needed to be able to go through all my experiences. But if I needed to do a traditional inventory, all had to be in words, which was going to be impossible because the experiences didn't have words. There weren't names for the forms of perception that I was doing, where there's color sounds and sound shapes and shape textures and harmonics and structures and cognitive. Anyway, there's no words for these things, so even though they're perfectly useful experiences for me and ways of processing. So what I did find, though, that was that instead of trying to go get an objectifiable narrative for past experiences, one of the most helpful tools I could do was at least go back and not keep at arm's length the person that I was inside difficult experiences. And so I created a new half of the inventory where I go back to the experience, and I take a catalog of inside the experience that's difficult to ask myself what my bodily sensations are inside there being changed, what I'm noticing. Because I found that what really bothers me is being changed by experience and having to re-understand everything and get to know myself again, get to know safety and all those different things. So I would write down my physical sensations, and I would write down what emotions those sensations created in me. And then I'd write down what thoughts those emotions led to. And then I'd write down what beliefs those thoughts led to. And I began inventorying these difficult experiences, not so that I could be morally right with figuring out how to be right with the outside world, but to find a voice that I could learn how to be right with myself in having them. And very slowly what I found is I cataloged these difficult experiences and just took my time. And I had language today that I did not have in the moment with the experiences before. And as I found my voice for the experiences, I found an entirely different kind of grounding that was totally unexpected. So by adding a second half of the inventory, which is not about getting right with the world in a moral sense, but getting right with myself, I began to get a grounded relationship with myself in a way that cognitive language could never give me. And based on that, it gave me agency to begin more responsibly figuring out how I want to participate in the outside world of people that don't experience what I experience. It let me keep grounding even though there was no context, and I didn't have to control people either. I started actually beginning to learn how to trust myself and my way of processing. So I hope that's helpful, the second side or the other side of inventory. That's all. Bye.